It is time for database. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so this section is a little bit of a, of course we'll touch on models again, what they do. So some of this may seem obvious for some of you, but it's good to revisit what Magento does with models. Again, Magento's MVC implementation is quite distinct. So this first section, so for the first kind of, well, I guess we're almost into the second half of the day, we'll be dealing with just database in general, stuff we can do with models and everything. And then for the third half, we'll be dealing with EAV. I said third half. Come on, guys. All right. So first part here, models, resource, models, and collections. Oh my. That's what we've been talking about, these sort of three different flavors of model in Magento. And then, after that, install and upgrade scripts. All right? So, database in Magento. Models, resource, models, and collections. All right, so we're going to look at, we'll kind of look at database connections, not really in depth, but just point out that they're there. Creating and registering entities. Oh, cool. Well, we've seen that for the most part. We're going to add to our configuration. We're going to do what really matters. Yeah, loading and saving and information from the database or into the database. We'll look at also some filtering that we can do on these collections. All right, so again, MVC, typical design pattern for an application. Business logic. Business logic is mostly in the models and the view and only very lightly in the controllers. Like I said before, I'd like to notch out this over the controller because business logic is pretty much mostly actually in the view. Very, very, very light modeling. Business logic in the model. All right, so quick review. Storing data, entire entities. Well, that would be like what you do in a spreadsheet, or if you've ever made like a CMS system or anything. You probably had a table. Each row was the complete information about some entity. Yeah, I mean that's fundamental. And that's a big first step to take. So, how would we have access to that in Magento? Well, Magento uses this three-tiered approach for models. So the model, what we refer to as the model, kind of the entity model, that's the thing. Well, this gives us access to our create, read, update, and delete operations. And that actually is done through the resource model, because the resource model is the class that knows how to talk to the data store, how to talk to the database adapter, actually, to get information. So then we also have, thankfully, collections. And we have collections so that we can, in an object-oriented fashion, manage our collections of entities when they're grouped together. Just another layer for us to work with models in a different context. So Magento uses three different basic storage approaches. You have this simple model, and we've looked at this. So like core config data, like each record in there is a distinct thing. Core store, core website, or the URL rewrites. These are simple. So these are the same ones that we probably all experienced at some point in our lives, where that one row in the table represents the entire all the information about the entity. There's also some complex models. In this case, CMS pages, sales orders, sales quotes also aka like shopping carts. These involve more than one table to really get a complete record of something. So in this case, quotes and orders, for example, will also have references to items. So sales quote items, sales order items. So if you really wanted an order entity, you really want the information about the order, and you also want the information about the items contained in the order. So complex model just means we have maybe more than one table involved. And then we have the EAV model. Examples of EAV entities in Magento are products, categories, customers. These are a bit more complex because what we have is configurable attributes. We can add attributes to these entities in a very a fairly normalized and very object-oriented way. I have an entire section to talk about EAV. So that's all I'm going to say about that right now. All right. So we'll shift gears and actually look at data access conceptually. So this would be a basic, decent data access scenario. So you have your storage. In between your storage and your entities, you have some kind of adapter. So this way we don't actually have to have, say for example, raw SQL in here. We might have some sort of generic conceits that we'll use to talk to whatever database adapter. Theoretically, we should have our code here so that we could swap out this database adapter if we decide to switch database stores. This would be the worst. So we would probably have to duplicate data access code for every model, and it would be tied directly to whatever storage engine we were using. So if we wanted to switch from MySQL to Oracle or something, well, we'd have to go and touch every one of our models. This would be horrible. If we want to further abstract things, well, we introduce resource models. Magento does this. So here, our entities talk to resource models. Our resource models talk to the database adapter, and through the database adapter are able to communicate with the data store. So the resource models generally know a little bit about the adapter that they have to work with, but theoretically we could swap out this and swap data stores. You can, and you would probably need to specify a different adapter to do that, and that's possible. You can specify different adapters for your model. That was on the chopping block for this course, fortunately. But yes, no, absolutely. You can specify a different storage data store and specify a different data adapter, and then you would have to obviously adjust your syntax. So there is a little bit of coupling here. There has to be. And then the rest of what Magento introduces is this resource collection. So this would be, again, this would use models, receive information from the resource model, and basically get data, get a result set through the resource model, and then use the models to apply that data to the models and give us back a collection. We'll look at this in just a second and just how it's implemented. Magento's done us a big favor with some of the things that they've done with these resource collections that make working with collections of models much easier. All right, but now we must look at how we tell Magento about our models. And we've seen this so far, but we'll go over this again. So in our config, our module config, we would have config global models, that's the path, and then our class group name. So we would want our class group name to be distinct. And then inside here, well, we'll specify our class prefix. Again, this is the file path, the beginning file path to our model files. So once we've set this up, again, we can begin to create entities to our heart's desire. This is the minimum configuration required for Magento to find these files. All right, so we've seen some of these calls here. This deprecate, you would never do this. Obviously, if you instantiate these classes directly, you wouldn't ever be able to override them. That's why we use factory, get model, or get singleton in the case of entity models. So here, get model, Mage catalog model product. So Mage catalog model. So again, catalog maps here, from which we get the beginning of our class name, and then in this case we'd get product.php. So Mage catalog model product. We wanted to get that single instance, so I discussed singletons the other day in that unique Magento way that they do singletons. We would do it this way. So again, in the same execution scope, if I call Mage get singleton and assign it to some variable, if later on I assign I call Mage singleton and assign that to another variable, those two variables are just pointers to the same entity instance. Okay? So in our module, that would look like, the declaration would look like this. Config global models. You can always think that, just config global models. Some unique node for us, that'll become our class group, and then our class prefix. So you can see here we have this nice note. This maps to my company, my module, model folder. Now, so that's entity models. How do we specify resource models? Resource models. Well, in here, again, we're still using a similar notation. Put a couple examples up here. So we're still using similar notation for our factory method for resource models. So we might have product Mage get model catalog product. And for a resource model, it's going to look very similar. We're just using a different static function. Conveniently enough, though, and I rather like this, we have the same string passed in here. But here's the entity, and here's how we talk to the data store regarding our entity. So what this maps to, obviously these have to map to different places, though, because this is going to give me a different class than this. So again, this class group is used, catalog. The system will look for this under config global models, and then we'll look for a resource model node. And then this node here, or this string here, becomes another node adjacent, basically another model node. Okay? And then that, in turn, contains a class prefix so that we can get whatever the class prefix is, /product.php. That's all there is to it. Now, unfortunately, so both of these are EAB entities. So you might expect that there would be some sort of parity between the folder structure underneath them. There isn't. And I can't give you a good reason why. It's just different naming conventions. So here, resource models would point to, for example, Mage customer model entity. And for catalog, it's Mage catalog model resource EAB MySQL 4. A little cumbersome. Just a different naming convention. Okay. That was confusing for me at first. I assumed there must be some other magic machinery around that, and that's why we had to have this different structure here. It's not the case.